Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily. Today is Thursday, June 13th, 2024. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be talking about The Boys Season 4, and we're going to present an interview with showrunner Eric Kripke. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm an editor at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
All right, Jacob, as you know, I have not seen any of The Boys, the popular Prime Video superhero show, but the show is back for its fourth season, which is, I believe, premiered on Amazon today. I think you can watch at least the first few episodes right
Yeah,
now.
the first three dropped today, and they'll be dropping weekly going forward.
Excellent. Okay, so what do you, I know you've been keeping up with the show. What do you make of season 4? What do you think about it so far?
I'm a big fan of the first three seasons, ups and downs, but largely a show I really like and find really vital. Season 4 is the first season where I felt a bit iffy with it, and to the point where I passed on the review to another slash film writer who enjoyed it more. And the reviews of the new season, or the views of the new season across our team, kind of all over the place. There are those who think it's good, maybe not up to the highs of previous seasons. And there are those who are just feeling like it's really starting to run its course, that like it needs to get its end game in ASAP. Which is funny because in an interview I had, I actually asked Eric Kripke about the end game for the show, if there's a plan, and you'll get to hear him explain his process and what his current views on the ending were. And then, like, literally days after his interview, it's announced that season 5, the next season, will be ending the show. So I think knowing the show is ending in conjunction with what Kripke says about the ending in an interview adds some fresh new context to the whole conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Were there any particular like highlights or anything of this season that you can get into without necessarily like giving away any sort of major twists or big deaths or any kind of like huge spoilery stuff?
Unfortunately, that's kind of what the problem is that I'm having a tough time with highlights, because season 4 is the first season of The Boys where I really feel like it's kind of spinning its wheels. Like, it needs to either shit or get off the pot, not to get too crude. But it is the first season where I feel like every character's kind of in a holding pattern. The things that were really exciting and fresh for 3 years are like, oh, they're doing this again. They're doing it again.
Yeah.
So and so hasn't changed. So and so is doing it. So and so is back to their old ways. So and so is being completely ignored by the story, because to advance their story would be to end the show. So I think that it's very, very healthy for The Boys that they set an end game at this point. And like I said, I know that even with the mixed reaction to the slash film crew, I think that all of us sort of thought, "Oh, thank God," when we heard that it was ending. Not out of relief of it's going to be over, but out of relief of it has a chance to end well. So I think season 4. I don't want to say everyone's going to be down on it, but I definitely do think that it's going to probably give folks a little bit of relief and know that's coming to an end. I think probably relief for the people making it too, because I just want to point out that I feel really bad being a little down on this season, because Eric Kripke is a wonderful interview, and he's a really seasoned TV guy, as you'll hear in our conversation. He's best known, or not best known, but maybe made his name as the showrunner for the first 5 years of Supernatural. And he's been on network TV for years and years and years around that, before he went to The Boys and streaming. And we talked about this in the interview, but like, he's just the old school mentality of, we used to do 22 episode seasons. Uh, Here's how that shaped me, as a showrunner. Here's why I
Mhm.
think this is valuable for other people entering the industry to be able to work like that, because it really does craft them as writers and producers in a way that streaming doesn't. And he's just a really thoughtful, uh, funny, interesting guy. And yes, we talk about the villain in The Boys, Homelander, the sort of what if Superman was a completely evil type character, who's been like severe break. He's been the breakout character of the show for sure. And we talk about how he just his reaction to people not understanding the Homelander as a villain, which in the era of certain politicians shouldn't come as a surprise, but it still does. Um, but yeah, we can probably get to the interview shortly, Ben, unless you have more questions. But I do want to point out that before the interview started, there were technical difficulties where they couldn't get the recording working. So I sat there on the Zoom call with Eric Kripke for like 5-6 minutes. We just chatted about what we were watching before the interview started.
That's cool. You rarely get that
Yeah,
opportunity. I mean, the royal you, but
and he asked me what I was watching, and I recommended Fallout and Slow Horses, which he was already watching. Then I recommended Evil, And he's like, and it's the one he hadn't watched, and started asking about Evil. So there's a point in the interview where I bring up Evil as a comparison point to The Boys, and it's said in a very familiar way that, you know, you can cut that part out of the written interview. If you read this interview on slashfilm.com in its transcript mode, that part is trimmed out. But in the audio, you'll hear me bring up Evil as if we were already talking about it previously, and that's why. So to get to the part of the interview, you're wondering, why is Jacob bringing up Evil so randomly? It's because we were literally talking about it 10 minutes earlier.
Excellent. Okay, well, here is your conversation with Eric Kripke.
Yeah, we'll jump right in here.
Yeah.
You and I, before the recording, we're just talking about television and other shows. So I kind of want to get some nuts and bolts about your process as a writer and as a showrunner, because, you know, coming from a world of more traditional network TV, you know, Supernatural and other projects, you are cranking out 20 episodes a season. And I'm wondering, how did that landscape and working in that more traditional method prepare you for streaming, and how does it inform your choices when you have fewer episodes but perhaps bigger budgets?
First of all, 22 episodes, just because it was so painful that I need to say that. Well, I'll tell you one thing, it makes streaming easy as shit in terms of your stress level. Like I'll never have an extreme. It's like I always say that, you know, and they don't really even do it that much anymore, but that 22, sometimes 23 episode seasons, like that is the extreme sports version of show running. Like if you can survive that, you can survive anything. And so if nothing else, it gave me the confidence of when everything catches fire on this show, and it always does because you're constantly managing chaos. But when everything catches fire, you just don't panic. I'll never be in a tougher situation than I was when I was running that show.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, you appreciate it. You appreciate the time and money they give you. It's such a gift to finish shooting all of your episodes before you air any of them, because you can come up with an idea in the 7th episode that just needs setup in the 1st episode, and you still have time to go back and shoot a couple scenes in the 1st episode that you know, make that work. So the reason streaming shows feel so coherent in their storylines is because you've shot them all already. And so you can look at them as a piece and go back and reshoot and change things and make them all fit, which is impossible to do when you're airing episodes every week and already writing the ones that come 5 episodes later. So that I think is really valuable. But yeah, I mean, we shoot The Boys on a schedule that was twice as long and like 4 times the money than what we shot Supernatural on. And so now I think had I started that way, I don't know if my filmmaking would be as sharp, because you need to really learn how to make things work for no money, so that you can remain disciplined when you do have money. So I think that's a value too.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these headlines about people who are talented writers but don't have the nuts and bolts filmmaking experience being thrust in the showrunner positions. And I'm glad you spoke to this, because I want to know your thoughts on the idea of, you know, these larger seasons, more traditional network TV, having functions clearly a training ground for you to get you to prepare you.
Yeah.
Do you feel this is a dangerous for television if people don't have that?
I think it's a huge danger, and you know, it's one of the things the writers struck about, because you need to, like, young writers need to learn how to produce, and they need to be on set. They need to, you know, hear the actors say their words. They need to understand that what they're writing on the page has an impact on literally hundreds of people. And they need to learn how to navigate all of it. And you know, it's just network television in general, in particular, the CW, which, you know, because those were smaller, lower budget shows, you know, you could bring in a lot of young writers and really train them. And you don't really have that opportunity anymore. And so you're throwing these people who have never done this job into, you know, these huge shows, and then you're surprised when it becomes a flaming shit show. And it's not that person's fault. They're not being set up to succeed. You know, they need to learn how to, you know, you got to learn how to crawl before you can fly, man. And so I think it's so important. And that's why, to me, like even before the strike, I was like, all my writers are going to set. That's all there is to it. Not just because it's better training for them, like it's better for the show, because now they know how to produce it when they're writing it. They know what the sets look like in three-dimensional space and how what the actors' like strengths are. It's just, to me, it's so self-defeating to not do that, because so what? So a studio can save a few bucks on what, airline fees? I mean, what's the value? And in exchange, they're not training up the next generation. And it might not be a problem today, but if it's not like fixed substantially, it's gonna be a huge problem in a few years.
Well, speaking of flaming shit shows, there have always been headlines about a certain segment of people who watch The Boys and insist there's no politics, insist it's not a political show, you're overthinking it. And I have to imagine this drives you crazy as much as it drives me crazy. And do you write with those people in mind now, or do you try to ignore it?
No, I don't write with them in mind. I mean, look, it doesn't really particularly bother me. I just kind of throw up my hands and I'm like, well, I don't know what else to do then. If you know, the show is many things, subtle is not one of them. And if you're like, for instance, think Homelander's a hero, like, I just don't know what to tell you. I just like, I don't know what to tell you. So, but you know, look, but on the other hand, if people want to watch this show as just like escapist entertainment, like as any other superhero thing, I guess, thanks for watching, question mark. You know, but obviously the show has a lot on its mind, and you know, I would certainly appreciate it more if people get like the different layers that we, you know, work so hard to put into it.
Speaking of Homelander, were you as surprised as I was that he's emerged as a breakout character? I mean, he's a great villain, but I feel like he's the kind of villain who could have been conceived in the past decade. He's such a character of his time. Yeah. And I think that he's become such a figure for everything that is terrifying about life right now. I'm curious about how you reacted to how people have embraced him as being that icon of, hey, things are fucked up right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, even as short as 10 years ago, the idea of a celebrity trying to turn themselves into an authoritarian autocrat was a slightly crazy idea. And then with, you know, 2016 and the buildup to it, suddenly it became a very, very real idea. And here's this comic book that has a character that's doing exactly the same thing. And I really lucked into adapting it at the single best time in history to adapt that comic. And so I think he really connects with people on that level. I think none of that would happen if Anthony Starr isn't delivering just a masterful performance every single episode. He like makes you understand the guy. He gives 17 facial expressions when someone else gives one. He's just an astounding actor, and he's doing Emmy-worthy work. And it's mind-blowing to me that he hasn't won anything yet. And I think he makes that character so undeniable, and is delivering just such a performance for the ages that I think people are just naturally gravitate towards it.
Speaking of the comic, I mean, I'm wondering, do you ever maintain contact with the creators of the comic, Garth Ennis or Derek Robertson? How they feel about the changes that you made to the show? Because at this point, it's kind of become its own thing, with the premise as a jumping off point.
No, I'm in, especially when I'm writing scripts, I'm in regular contact with Garth, and then we talk to Derek throughout as well. Garth reads every single draft. He gives me notes on Butcher's dialogue, which I'm happy to take because
Mm.
I'm not, I'm not from that part of the world. And look, he always said to me early, he said, get Butcher right and get the tone and the characters right.
Mm.
And in terms of the story, like I get that the story has to be different. And so yeah, no, we deviate quite far. It is its own animal. And to people who say, yeah, but I love the comic book, but what about the comic book? I say, go read the comic book. The comic book's amazing. It's a beautiful piece of art, but what I'm making is sort of my interpretation of how the comic book makes me feel, and again, all I try to do is I try to capture the tone, and I try to get the characters, and I try to capture like how I feel when I read it, and try to convey my excitement to the audience. And so, I think I think they like it. I think Garth likes it. He tells me he does, but so we'll see.
I know famously, like every show with these larger overarching storylines, you hear, like for example, the Lost guys always talk about how they had a loose plan. They kind of had an endgame in mind. The Breaking Bad staff always talked about they kind of made up as they went along, and both plans have resulted in great shows. Where does The Boys fall in the spectrum between master plan versus making shit up?
I'd say we're squarely in the middle. Every season we know that we want Homelander to get a little more disconnected from reality, and we want Butcher to get a little scarier. The show is, at the end of the day, about these like two forces, charging towards each other between Butcher and Homelander. And so I know that them finally smashing into each other once and for all will be a big part of whatever endgame we come up with. But beyond that, and beyond sort of knowing where I want Huey, it's like I know where I want a lot of the characters to end up. That's what I would say. Like I actually don't even necessarily know the climax of the show as much as I know that 10 pages that happens at the end when they say 6 months later and you see where everyone is. Like I know where everyone is. So then my job is, whenever we get to it, my job is to just make sure we can back into that.
It's funny for people listening to this this audio in the interview. Before we recorded, you and I were chatting about Paramount Plus's Evil, and I spoke to the showrunners of that last week, and they said that they reached their thematic climax even if they didn't have the actual like physical roadmap lined out. So it sounds like you have your thematic climax. You just don't know how you're gonna get there quite yet.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to know. You want you want a room of brilliant writers to surprise you, and you want to leave space for that because it's their show too. So I think there's a danger in being overly planned out. It's too insular. It's a little suffocating.
All right, so time for one more question, it looks like. And between Diabolical and Gen V, shows that clearly you have your name on them, but I'm not sure how directly involved they are in day to day. Are you satisfied and happy to be the godfather of the Boys universe? Like, are you like saying like I'm going to sit back in my chair and let other talented people handle it, and just let this be a thing I oversee for a while? Like, how much Boys is too much Boys for you?
I'm still having a blast, and as long as it's still fun, and as long as I still love the world, I'm happy to work on it. We have brilliant people, both on Diabolical and Gen V, and a couple things we're working on in development, and each of their own shows. They bring their own sensibilities and they're totally different, but I weigh in a lot. I mean, I weigh in a lot of like, probably like, bald Kevin Feige, and try to, make sure that it's tonally consistent and logically consistent with like the larger world. But you want each show to feel different.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want the thing where it's like, you're just spitting out widgets. You want each piece to be its own idiosyncratic thing that could have lived on its own.
I was picturing you wearing the about baseball cap and staying in front of a giant screen, pitching the next 10 years of Boy shows.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, phases 12 through 19.
All right, I'm out of time, but thank you so much. This was great. Congratulations on the show, and
Thank you.
I hope everything goes. I'm the last one, so please go lie down. I know it's been a long day.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, you take it easy.
You too. Bye.
All right, Jacob, I have also not dipped in on any of the spin-off shows around The Boys. And you asked Kripke at the very end of that conversation about him sort of serving in this godfather capacity of this franchise. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on those spin-offs. Like, now that The Boys is going to be coming to an end with season 5, are you excited about the creative directions that those spin-offs could go? And like, is this world big enough to sustain, all these different shows? Because I think there are even more in development too. So what do you think about all that?
That's the question, because so much of The Boys is, it's vicious satire in all directions, and it definitely does not pull its punches toward Marvel and DC filmmaking, especially Marvel. It has some real vicious below the belt punches on the MCU throughout its years, and if it continues to grow like this and have spin-offs, it kind of threatens to become what it's targeted, which I don't know. I genuinely do not know how Gen V and Diabolical, the two spin-off shows, function without a core show to orbit around. And I think that the big worry is that a show as broad and as big and as Eric Kripke himself called it, unsubtle as The Boys, is running out of gas. And they at the point where they need to pick an ending now. Then I don't know. I don't. Personally, I think that The Boys universe should be kind of a smaller one. I think that I would love to see Kripke get paid because, like I said, I genuinely think he's a talented guy, and I want him and his team only good things for them. But I also think that maybe giving Kripke a new deal at Amazon to pursue his dream project, something I'd rather see than having him just continue to Kevin Feige over The Boys universe.
Yeah. I mean, I would too, just like conceptually, theoretically, like that sounds like the more sort of creatively fulfilling ideal. I just wonder, like, from Amazon's perspective, The Boys is a huge show for them. That not a ton of like Amazon Prime Video original uh, projects have broken through in the way that The Boys has. So I understand why they're, deciding to work on all these spin-offs and stuff. I'm kind of surprised that they're saying, okay, The Boys, the mothership show can end after season 5, just because it's such a big deal for them. It seems like one of the true sort of tentpole shows for them, that I'm wondering if like they're just going to end this iteration of it, let those side shows run for maybe a couple years or something, and then like immediately revamp the Boys with a new creative person behind at the helm of it or whatever. What would you say to something like that? I mean, it sounds like you're kind of opposed to that based on what you just said to me, but
Yeah, I'm assuming it's something that Amazon does, is that they'll cancel shows and then bring them back with a new subtitle, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that means that they don't have to pay cast and creators fees that they get for season 6. If it's season 1 of a new show with a new subtitle instead of season 6 of the old show, and they don't have to give everybody raises. That's why Bosch Legacy exists, when they could have just done another season of Bosch. So I don't know. I wouldn't put it past Amazon. I mean, I genuinely think Amazon makes a lot of really good shows. Fallout is extremely good. The Boys, even with this rough patch of the season, is still a really good show. On the record as being a big Reacher fan. So I just think that the creative energies at Prime Video are clearly trying to operate within the corporate machine of Amazon, and I don't trust the corporate machine of Amazon to make the right creative choices, even when there are people who are as generally talented as experienced, like genuine hardcore TV creative experiences. Eric Kripke. I don't know who comes out on top in that fight.
yeah.
But I have a guess that it's not the one you want to hear.
Okay, last thing before we go, because I have you here, we got an email recently from Jerry in Ohio who says, "Hi, Ben and Slash Film Crew. Ben and Jacob mentioned reading some books on a recent water cooler episode. When I was working in the office I used to work at, I always used to have a book on me to read. Now that I'm working from home, I have so many distractions that I haven't read anything in years. I'm going to get back to reading. Do you buy physical books, or are you reading on a Kindle or other device?" And I think, Jacob, you and I have talked about this in the past before, where like we're big fans of reading books physically. I still am that way. I have not switched over to listening to audiobooks or anything like that. I know you've talked about dabbling with the audiobooks of the Reacher stuff. I'm curious if your thoughts on audiobooks and things like that have evolved over the years, and like what's your primary method of reading when you do that these days?
I do a mixture of all of the above. I read digitally for long form magazine articles. Like I'm the guy who pays for the New Yorker, Ben. That's where that's where I read on my iPad or formerly my Kindle before Amazon. Speaking of Amazon making bad choices, before Amazon killed their magazine subscription through their Kindle. But my current divide is that I read nonfiction in physical book form. Anything that is nonfiction, I will read physically. Anything that's fiction, I'm currently listening to in audiobook form. However, because I'm sick in the head, if I like the audiobook, I'll buy a physical copy of it to have on my shelf. So I've listened to, like I said, I was on the show last. I talked about how I was on book 7 of the Slough House series with the basis for Slow Horses. And I've been listening to those via audiobook. Gerard Doyle's the narrator on those, and he's awesome. It's really funny. Gerard Doyle is such a talented actor, and there were so many great British accents and UK accents. The one accent he can't pull off is American, so it's very, very funny whenever an American character shows up in one of those books. But yeah, for me, I think that audiobooks depend on narrators. Like I know previously I discussed how much I enjoy the original narrator for the Jack Reacher books before he passed away. I don't like the current narrator nearly as much. It was one of the reasons why I'm taking a break from Jack Reacher for a bit. But like I said, for me, it really depends on the genre of the book. And to speak to working from home and trying to find time for this, my rule, Ben, is that if I'm enjoying my audiobook, I am only allowed to listen to it while exercising. I have to go for a walk. I have to go to the gym or go for a run. And only if I'm being active can I listen to my fiction books. Nonfiction, anytime, anywhere. That's still my rule. If it's a physical book, great. I can read that anytime. But if it's an audiobook, it's got to be while I'm being active. And by keeping that rule in place, I have got myself exercising more. And since I'm trying to exercise more often, it means I'm reading more by listening to more books. It ends up being a really healthy cycle. So I actually really recommend that, especially if you work from home and need an excuse to get out of the house, get more active, try to, be a little more, even a tad bit more fitness in your life. An audiobook that's restricted only to that time has been a lifesaver for me.
Excellent. Yeah, that's really smart. Okay, cool. Well, thank you to Jerry for writing that in. I appreciate it. That's always appreciated when anybody writes us an email or anything. So if anybody else has any questions or anything, feel free to fire them our way. You can find much more about The Boys at slashfilm.com. I will link to our review of season 4 in the show notes as well. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag topics to us at bpearson@slashfilm.com. That's BPEARSON at slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to take a minute to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really does help us out a lot. Tell your friends about the show any way you can. Thank you so much.